Hi. Hello.
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 Hello?
Hello and welcome to Architecting.
Yeah, let's get into that. So the first hard question here of who are you? You know how to answer that?
Yeah, it dawned on me a good way to, how to answer that question is a good way to know what somebody's like is to watch them cook. How do they cook? And so I thought about, well, how do I cook? And really the one thing I do is I'll make a soup on a Sunday. And I thought, just as a, like, what does that say? But the more I thought about it, it's interesting over the years making soup. It's eerily similar to how I've evolved practicing architecture. So I'm a soup maker, I guess.
A soup making architect. Yeah.
But I realized the difference is I used to really follow a recipe. And when I know you were talking about in a recent podcast about intuitive or analytical, and I think I was far more analytical about how I said about cooking or making. And now, I won't even follow a recipe. I just, use what's in the fridge and what I like or what people, who I might be cooking for. So anyways, it made me think, and I've noticed other people, if I ever just see them cook, it tells you a lot about who they are. So I'm a soup maker.
Yes. What is it about about Sunday soup that has evolved into that? Like.
Yeah, and it made me think about that too. I know as architects we have a lot going on. Your life, there's just so many aspects. Teaching and practice just has a million components to it. I think what I like about it is I can focus on that one project for a couple hours. It's pretty time consuming. There's the prep, that's maybe getting something out of the garden, figuring out what's available, or but I think the idea is that it's a Sunday afternoon and that you can just focus on one project for a few hours.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice thing. And then the result is something you can share, something usually pretty generous, which is a goal, I think, of architecture, if it can be something that people really enjoy, and it's a very generous thing and very healthy, has a lot of history behind it, maybe some culture behind what soup it was, so I think there's a lot of, it's funny, the more I thought about it, the more correlations it started to come up with.
Yeah, I do all the cooking at our house, and I love that time. I'm constantly struggling with that, like 5 o'clock, and I feel like I don't start ramping up work, or I get really into something about 4:30, and then 5 o'clock hits, and I'm like, I do not want to stop, but I have to, and so picking up the kids, whatever, and then that thing is still in my head, and I find cooking dinner really helps that, where I can kind of turn everything else off, and or slowly turn it off, and then get into that food jazz. Transition over. But so where did you grow up?
So I'm from Denver.
Oh, okay.
I was born at St. Anthony's, is no longer there, along Sloan's Lake, but really grew up in Golden and Applewood. And Applewood's really trendy for the mid-century modern people moving out there. It was a wonderful place the Mesa was my backyard, South Table Mesa. And really my parents, my mom my dad and mom are both school teachers. My dad became a school administrator. But they ended up buying this fantastic house, just reaching for the stars, and it was built in 1961, a big A-frame on stilts hanging off the side of the Mesa. So just a spectacular place to grow up in terms of that giant landscape, and then this A-frame house that looked to the north, but the sunsets were incredible every night. The design of the house was really remarkable. And so, again, just very fortunate to have this environment to grow up in.
Yeah. Did it feel like a different type of house, like when you went to your other friend's house or things like that? Yeah, it felt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people really enjoyed coming over. And again, I liked it because it was really a nice house, but it was spectacular but unassuming. It wasn't so in your face, but it, fairly small, but this giant A-frame with a big steel fireplace in the middle of it, and these huge glass windows that faced, and we get these Chinook winds, and it would just blast the house in the winter. It wasn't the most practical house. It was really cold in the winter. It was on stilts, so all the cold air was
really?
underneath.
They just insulate under it well, or in the roof? Yeah.
No one thought about that, and so, but yeah, people really enjoyed coming over. It was a great house to have people, just friends, and my parents had a lot of stuff in the dining room or bring people over.
Huh. What did they teach?
So my mom taught business at Golden High School.
Oh, interesting.
And then she became an interior designer. Huh. She decided to leave the public school system and really self-created herself as an interior designer. And my dad taught art. Oh. And he became, he ran the art department for Jefferson County Schools.
Oh, wow.
And Adam, he did such a good job of thinking about, he decided that he could write grants for the public schools. And I think he was one of the very first people that ever did that. He just decided to write to the Gettys, the Rockefellers, and he said, I want to put a kiln in every classroom. I want to fund my schools. And it turned out that, his fellow administrators like, what are you doing? You can't ask these people. And he said, if I don't ask, I know the answer.
Right.
And so he ended up getting millions of dollars for Jefferson County Schools. It turned out those people who wanted to fund the arts were looking for a new avenue to really make it impactful in the public. And I think that's had a big influence on me also, just that idea of, you know the answer if you don't ask. And so why not, why not knock on, that was great, Harvey Hines interview that you did with him, now just knock on a door internationally of architects.
Yeah.
That whole idea of just why not ask?
Right.
And you never know. And it could be, it's exactly what the other side's looking for. They say, oh, this is great. We've had this problem. We don't know where to give this money.
Right. So what was his kind of median that he would work in? Was he creating a lot of art around the house?
Yeah, so Dad was a watercolor artist, and but we had tons of artists come through the house. And there was in the 60s, there was a group of painters called the Colorado 15. So abstract expressionists, they're at that time, really the leading group of artists in Colorado. And Dad would invite them for workshops, symposiums. I grew up with all these guys. And they would call me Teddy, or, I would clean up after all their parties. But several of them are in the Kirkland Museum.
Oh, really?
And, if you go in, there are all these artists I grew up with and just had as friends. And some of them are still alive. We're losing a lot of them. But that was another just huge influence, just to be surrounded constantly by art and ideas and people that were just unafraid to make things happen.
Yeah. So was that some of the same knocking on the doors where he would just see a good artist that he liked and go and approach them, or was it as sort of he just had friendships with people? And
yeah, he was a master of that. And he would approach people and say, would you do a symposium in the schools? Would you like to collaborate? Would you so he was really involved with Vance Kirkland, with DU and Red Rocks, and he really integrated the whole art community for the benefit of the exposure of the students and of the work he did. We have the Pritzker Prize in architecture.
Right.
But every year they honor the National Art Educator of the Year.
Oh, really?
And he got that in '86.
Wow.
So I think he was just an incredible connector, not afraid to write grants, not afraid to make all these things happen. He's just passionate about kids being able to, besides math and science, there was just a lot of kids that weren't interested in all that. And So it was phenomenal what he did. So again, I think it was nice to see both my parents just reach for the stars and just say, why not, you know? And they, they were very unassuming about it. It wasn't about status or about, hey, look at us, or it was just about, bringing great things, within their disciplines.
And pursuing their passions, right? Of saying, yeah, this is what makes me happy, or this is what I want to do, and pushing forward with it.
Yeah.
So then when you graduated high school, did you know what you wanted to do? Was it all set up for architecture, or?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I knew in 4th grade what I wanted to do. One of those.
Huh.
Yeah. So
what was that like?
So that was, in Applewood then, it was a lot of small, maybe acre, little horse pasture. People had horses and they would ride them on the mesa. Well, eventually that was really prime land to get developed. And there were a lot of these 70s track houses coming in just all around the house we had. And my dad mentioned, he said, these houses need an architect. I said, what is an architect? And he explained to me that, they could do better with some thought, and especially with that beautiful landscape. And I thought, wow, that'd be something. I'd like to do that.
Right.
So that's how that got started. But I never wavered from it.
4th grade.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. My dad built our house that we grew up in, and it wasn't an A-frame, but it had a lot of volume to it. It had a bunch of exposed structure. It had these things that you don't see often, and I do think that influenced me a lot, of thinking, yeah, a house doesn't have to look like this or like that, and being, I mean, it's interesting being in that that spatial environment, and then being surrounded by that group of artists in the 60s, like that combined with 2 teacher parents, set you right off onto the architecture path, right?
Yeah.
So then when you got to school, where'd you go? Did you go to CEU Boulder?
I did.
Yeah.
And at that time, I know you've had lots of other people on that podcast talk about that oil embargo and all of that stuff happening in the 70s. And so I graduated high school in 1980.
Oh, okay.
And I talked to several architects just to, just talk to them about how the path should work. Every one of them told me, have something to fall back on, because I think they had just been through hell,
Who were those guys that you were talking to?
Oh,
at the time?
Local guys. There was, friends of my parents. And
Okay,
so, I think local practitioners here. And, I had opportunities when I was in, how you would go for a day and hang out with a professional from your school.
Oh, right.
But every one of them said, get a structural engineering degree also, so you have somebody to fall back on. It was funny. And so I took that advice.
Really?
And so I went to Boulder, but to the engineering school, Archie up there.
Oh, okay.
And I think Brant and Greg, who you just interviewed, they were up there about the same time I was.
Yeah.
And, and I really could identify something else that Harvey Hines said. I was really disappointed in my education. I didn't tell the director like he did, but it was all about, I think, training you to be a cog in the wheel. Training you to be a proficient engineer in a firm, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, again, but it just didn't stimulate. Thought, or it was really about just checking all of these boxes. And it's a 4.5-year program. They have hardly any electives.
This is the architecture engineering program
within the engineering school,
okay,
right? And it's mostly civil. So it was just very few electives, and so I found it really frustrating. I went ahead and finished it, but it was, at the end of the day, in terms of just education, in terms of giving you tools of things to work with, I always had something to fall back on, I guess.
So you did a full 4 years of that?
Yeah.
4.5, yeah?
Yeah.
And then what did that set you off into?
Yeah, so that made it really interesting to get, because I knew I wanted to be an architect. So I had this degree, and I thought I'd like to work for an architecture firm. I did some internships during the summers, like at Syracuse Lawler. That was a huge firm in town. He had 70 employees. Wow. So I had some exposure, but I took my portfolio. At that time, there was another, in '84, we had another horrible recession. You know, Denver was a one-horse, just oil and gas town.
Oil, yeah.
You know, now it's so much more diverse but if oil and gas was down, there was just no work. And, but that was actually good. My mom had a second marriage and moved to Florida, and they were booming. And I was ready to do something different after growing up in Denver, going to school in Boulder.
Right.
So Florida was booming, and I decided to knock on doors. So I knocked on the doors of 40 different architects for just Orlando, Tampa.
Yeah, what cities? Yeah.
Just the yellow pages, you know, just like that's, like I don't know, looking for a job. And
what was your hit rate there?
Oh, it's like zero.
Zero.
The 40th finally said,
really?
Oh, yeah.
So you just kept going until someone,
Yeah,
I mean, were people answering the doors and talking with you, or they just closing? Yeah.
Yeah, almost everybody, I got an interview right on the spot. So again, just knock on the doors. And they were busy. They needed people, but they couldn't understand my degree.
Oh, right.
And I'm like, well, you know, I had drafting classes. I can do all this stuff. But the 40th said, yeah, come on. And so I worked for a couple of years in Tampa for that firm. The owner, it was a branch office of a big office in North Carolina. But the head of the branch office, he started his own practice, and he took me with him. So it was just the two of us for a while.
Like right after you got there to Florida?
Yeah, so I worked it was called TAG.
Oh,
I worked at TAG for about a year and a half, and then Walter, the regional manager, he broke off and took his, and so it was actually quite nice. He took me, he took the cheapest guy with him. But you know, that's how fast I learned and figured out how to do stuff. And
what kind of work were you doing down
we
there?
were doing big apartment projects. So literally we would cut out the shape of the apartment building and then had the site. And then I remember just taking those pieces of paper and throwing them on the table and arranging those apartment buildings and trying to weave in parking and all these big retention ponds you have to have. And it was not very enlightened architecture for sure. But you know, just amazing what my colleagues know, you know, what architects, just to put a set of drawings together. And so it was fine for me. It gave me an introduction to you know, what architecture's all about, or one side of it anyway.
And then how did that end?
So that, I ended up, I was working, you know, we would work all hours, and that was great because I was getting paid by the hour. So I think it was $5 an hour. But how that ended was I went to a party and met someone who had just come back from an island called St. Croix. And so Adam, I don't know if you've ever just sat next to somebody and you know, you just end up talking and just have this, I could not hear enough about this island. And they had lived there for a year and a half or so. They told me all about what it was like to live there. And so I just decided right then and there, I'm moving. And you know, I think I'd played out everything in Tampa, and you know, we were working all those hours. I was a little burned out.
Right.
And so I told my girlfriend, who's my wife now, the next day I told her all about this island and said, I'd like to go. And she said, I'd like to go too. So sight unseen, we moved to St. Croix.
They probably didn't have, they don't have 20 architects on the island, right? There's no, how many doors are there to knock on? Yeah.
Yeah, so that.
What happened?
Well, that, she got a job teaching through the mail. So she had a job before we got there. But I took carpentry tools. I thought I could be a bartender. I brought my drafting stuff just in case.
You were just like that much into island life. You were just ready for it.
Yeah, why not? Just a change. And we got there and we were in a guest house, the very next morning I'm brushing my teeth. The guy next to me, you know, he's brushing his teeth. Like, he had just moved to the island. Like, what do you do? And I just left an architecture firm. Well, he just like dropped his toothbrush. He said, oh my God, I just came down to work at an architecture firm. We're swamped. He says, you have to come down. He says, you have to come down.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so I went, it was a Thursday, I went down, I put a tie on, and I met the owner, and he, oh man, hired me on the spot, doubled my salary, what I was making in Florida. And I said, well, do you want me to come in tomorrow, Friday? He's like, no, and get rid of that effing tie. He said, go to the beach. And so Adam, it was
pinch me.
yeah,
that's
it was
ridiculous.
fantastic. And we were doing all this wonderful houses and businesses on the island.
Wow.
And every morning, I loved how they worked. We would meet for coffee for about an hour. There were 6 or 7 of us. So there was a little coffee in the square right below the office. And talk about life and maybe a little bit about projects. Work for about 6.5 hours. We all wore our shorts and t-shirts, but did really good work. I think learn that you don't have to kill yourself to do good work. They just had a great attitude and very sharp architects. I think the island attracted people that some really great people, but they just needed an unassuming, just casual place to be. And oh man, was that great. So I know it just happened.
Yeah. It's funny, I just had some friends who've been living in Denver, and they just bought a little compound of buildings in St. Croix. And the same thing, where they had been building up sort of, a duplex, owned a duplex, then like a 4-plex, then an 8-plex, and then their goal was to go to St. Croix and buy a spot. And the invitation's there. I need to take them up on it.
Oh, you do. Oh, you do. Yeah, it's the town. Christiansted is a lot of people say it's the nicest in terms of architecture. Just like a small city, very small, but it's beautiful architecturally. It's a gorgeous. It's all Danish architecture.
Oh, interesting.
The Danes would bring brick over as ballast and take mahogany and rum back. So it's all made out of Danish brick, but with like this hybrid of Danish architecture meets Caribbean. It's a beautiful city, and it's very different from St. Thomas or the other or St. John. So yeah, I would. It was a lovely place to live. It was quite laid back, but just with a lot of really interesting people.
Yeah. So why aren't you still there?
It just gets crazier from there. I think a lot of, my whole architecture career has really happened to me. I don't know that I've really planned it. That I was on the roof of a re-roofing of a condo project, and the head of the homeowners association, or the condo association, said, well, do you know an architect that can do a house for me? And I said, well, yeah, we do them all the time. And he said, you're not listening to me. He says, do you know someone who can do a house for me? And I say, are you talking to me? I think I'm 25. And and so we agreed on $4,000, and he gave me his car. I didn't have a car. My wife my girlfriend at the time had a car. So we
$4,000 in a car.
In a
nice.
car.
Yeah.
Well, he had breakfast the next day and said, I found this young guy that can do plans. And Jan, who he had breakfast with, was the lead, or the most successful realtor on the island and the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And so she took me to breakfast and said, your life is going to change. That was my interview. She just told me my life is going to change. And so I started to get all these, there was another part of the story is St. Croix goes through these huge cycles, like a hurricane will wipe it out, or it was just peaking again after 15 years of just nothing. And so people were coming left and right and buying lots and building vacation houses. And she had no one to do these houses.
Like your firm was swamped or too expensive? Like the firm that you were working at before?
Yeah, I could do it. I do it a lot less expensively, I suppose.
You ended up with a lot of cars, but like it still worked. Yeah.
But there's just not enough warm bodies on an island like this. You know, they're busy enough, and it was I don't think like Denver's a boom, or we've seen quite a boom over the last decade. The boom was unbelievable, Adam. There were so many people coming and buying lots and building houses. And they're all coming down from the East Coast, and they're all fabulous vacation houses that they want to build by the ocean. And she just didn't have enough. She could sell lots, but there was not near enough people to take care of them. And so I started, for a year, I just worked, I would moonlight doing that. And then eventually, within 2 years, I had 7 people working for me, designing vacation houses.
And you found people, and
I mean, whatever I could do.
Probably trained, or
I brought people down from Florida. I had my brother went to
30 years old yet. And
I'm 25 years old, and my brother at this time, he's at the GSD. He's an architect also.
Oh yeah.
So I had him working on stuff. Some of his buddies working on stuff. You know, like here's a house, here's a house, here's a house. And it was a blast. And Jan had her office downtown, and I rented a space right above her, so she would sell a piece of land, and they would just come right up.
Just go around the corner with the stairs, and
It's just you can't.
One stop shop, and then the contractor was the building next over. So what did that do? What did that do to your island life? You know, you're like, oh, I like an hour coffee, and I like my 6-hour days, but you're getting all this work. You know, did you have to make the switch where you're working crazy hours and, you know?
Well, the only thing that changed that, because, you know, that ethos, people understood it. But what changed that was the fax machine. One of my clients bought me one of those days, and it was like $3,500. And I know, again, who was talking about the thermo paper and just all that? I think the KLNA guys. But so because the postal system was so lousy from the islands, you know, everything was island life. And part of the reason people come down there, they understand. They don't, like if you want to be all frantic, you don't belong there. So, but the fax machine, all of a sudden, you know, before we would do sketches and mail them. And then it would take a while it was really nice, the back and forth. Or I had my own blueprint machine. I made blueprints and send them. And I guess we had FedEx, I suppose. But all of a sudden, you could get a call and say, well, can you fax me that by 5? So that, anyways, that was, you know, but it was still fine. They were really not, the clients were very patient. But it was, so what ended all of that, Hurricane Hugo came through and just destroyed the island. It went on to Charleston afterwards. It was one of the most vicious, you know, hurricanes, and like literally it just destroyed the island. And September 18th, that was 1989, and just, you know, woke up the next morning that the island was just denuded. It looked like winter in Colorado, and there were cars and trees, and we were really just happy to be alive. And I wanted to rebuild the island in the worst. You know, I love that place. I thought it was, you know, as an architect. But my wife, was no place for her. It was, there was all the looting was unbelievable. The National Guard was looting. The police were looting. The National Guard trucks were full of mattresses. It's the first time in 100 years we had to call out our own military on our own soil. It was kind of wild, just to quell it. And it was, and her schools were destroyed, but it gave me a chance to go to architecture school finally. So I've never been
after owning a firm of 6, 7 people, 8 people, and
isn't that funny?
Now time to go to school.
Now it's time to go to school. And the one thing about St. Croix, they did have a draftsman's license. It was the only place I've ever heard of this. And the test was a really serious test. You had to draw a full set of drawings for a house in 6 hours and answer all this stuff. It was the only way you could do houses down there is you had to be an architect or you had this draftsman's license. So, but it gave me a chance. I'm like, I always wanted to go to architecture school. So fine, we spent a year in DC area. I got a job with an architect just to fill in, and applied around and ended up coming to CU. I'm from here, but I was really impressed. EJ from Arc 11?
Yeah.
He was a student there at the time, and I walked in and he spent a couple hours talking with me. Oh, it was just great. Like, the people were that accessible. And he really told me how great the work was. And I had spent a lot of time at the GSD with my brother. I would go and help him. He's older. I would help him during finals.
What's his name?
His name is Lyndon. And I'd sit in, and you talked about how those studios are like at Yale, and that we don't quite have the same atmosphere here when you were talking with Katie. But I had a really good taste of, after spending, I would spend a week at a time with him, and I'd drop in and listen to all that stuff.
That's awesome.
But I honestly think what was happening here was just as good. Probably the one difference was just the access to so many famous and big thinkers coming through.
Right.
But I thought the quality of the work, and so I ended up here at CU to get my master's.
Who was here? It was like Douglas Durden.
Yeah.
Right. And what was the sort of what about the CU at that time really drew you in? Was it Durden or like the people there, or?
And I think listening to people like EJ and people that really talked about it, after that experience of engineering school being quite dry, I was really ready for some really rich thinking and engagement and challenging, and so it worked. The teachers were fantastic, and so across the board it was. I ended up in Arden's studio for the last, strap in, and it was
no more
daunting.
No
more island life then. But I'm so glad I had that. He was on his last legs at that time. He with his cancer, and he would just teach lying on the floor. The guy was amazing. He was so visceral and so, oh man. What an experience.
Did he have a sense that he was going to die? I mean,
oh yeah.
Yeah. And so that was really, he chose to do that with his last years, right? And chose to, that's so interesting. I've been thinking about that of if you knew you were going to die, what would you do? And what's that thing that you're passionate about? And to kind of feel that passion, or that, not desperation necessarily, but coming off somebody like that, with all these ideas and knowing that it's almost over, had to be powerful.
I think he was definitely fighting it, but absolutely knew that, his chances that this, but he kept drawing till the end too. He would strap in and draw for 16 hours straight, and he would use talcum powder and, just to, but just so accessible. He would really listen to you. He was intense, but just so open, and
not an egomaniac kind of thing.
Not at all. And he loved to learn from us as well. He was just, man. But the school, and I actually think the school's even gotten better. From all of the programs with Design Build and other ones within communities, and when I do juries down there, I'm really impressed. I tell people, CU's rocking it. It's a really good architecture school. So
I agree. I think there's great things happening, and good new professors coming in, and Mark Wagoner is doing a great job. And but so what was that final project?
So it was a great project. The Pope was coming that year for World Youth Day, and so that's a big. The Pope's coming to Denver, and there's 100 or 200,000 people going to come, and he spoke at Cherry Creek State Park.
Really?
So they just had this this huge open space, and so Doug said, create a. He wanted us to do the Stations of the Cross. In the Catholic Church, there's the 14 stations, and so we had to design the Stations of the Cross for World Youth Day, for the Pope being here, and that's as much as he said. So you had to come up with your own site, your own concept, like what would those be? So I chose the Mile High contour. There's an actual contour through the city that's actually a mile high. So it was fun.
It's marked in some way, or just no?
I think it should be. I think it'd be. But that was the proposition. Was, the Mile High is, I got out those old 7-minute maps. You could go to the Federal Center and get those big, beautiful topographic maps before we had Google everything. But they're about the size of this table. And you piece them together and you have the city, and you can find the 5280 contour. So what was fun about it was completely random where it goes based on our city.
Right.
And so I thought, what a nice thing in terms of the faith and the Stations of the Cross to follow something that is this uncertain path. And it was amazing because it actually led down Cherry Creek and had a lot of correlation, surprisingly, of where it ended up, and then designed these stations where related to Jesus falls 3 times, and there's just where he where he's actually put on the cross, that you had to interpret each one of those.
Right.
So it's very loaded Doug Darden project.
very, very, very different from your architecture engineering. And what was that like coming in with all your practical experience, right? Like you had to be fairly advanced student coming in compared to some of the other ones, and had a lot of practical knowledge. Was it an easy shift for you to make into that more ephemeral kind of thinking, or was it you had to get squeezed and reshaped a little bit?
Yeah, I think
or are you just ready for it? Yeah.
I think the 7 years of practice,
So you took 7 years off between.
Yeah, and I'm really glad I did. I think it, whatever circumstance led to that. Normally, I think I would have gone much sooner, but I really liked having that all under my belt. It made it far more engaging, and I was the TA for all the structures classes for Phil Gallegos.
Yeah.
And so that was fun. I think and I liked helping, structures was so confusing for so many students, and to make it palatable and understandable, it was just fun to, I think, teach it in a way that it was never taught to me, but more from the perspective of the architecture school.
Right.
And I TA'd the history classes just because I really wanted to learn it again and again. And then studios and all the theory classes I could possibly take. It was wonderful. But what happened when we got here, you mentioned, like we're all having babies while we make architecture. When I got here, we're having kids, and we would go to barbecues on the weekends with our babies, other young families. And every barbecue I went to, everyone needs a master bedroom addition, a pop top. So I got just as well. I didn't have to hire all those people, but I got slammed. So I was
during grad school.
Yeah. So I was doing all kinds of that kind of thing, pop tops and additions while I was in school. So I kept on working. I never really stopped. And so and so but actually that was fine. It was I would just whenever the kids were asleep, I'd just work all night.
Yeah, and so how old were your kids at that point when you were in grad school?
It's a great, the semester before I took Darden, I had my 6-month-old in my backpack, and I went to see his, I don't know why, I must have had him do daycare or something. And but I went to see Doug's final, because I was trying to decide if I wanted to take it. And so it was off-site somewhere where, in this, he always has some incredible program that he's putting together. And he had just presented the whole idea and the depth and the excitement. And they were about to break into groups, and everyone was going to go look at the work. So all were assembled. And there was just a couple-second pause before people leave. And my son was in the backpack, and he just gave the biggest raspberry. And it was so perfect because Doug had just been so flowery about all this stuff, and
so serious.
Everyone laughed, including Doug. It was just hilarious. But so my kids were. I just had my son during that last studio.
Wow.
And ended up crazy.
Yeah.
But that's where that's where really I got started here in Denver with I called it Agency for Architecture.
Oh yeah.
And I like that word agency because it means office, but also means connecting dissimilar things. Or if you have agency, you have it invites you to have some kind of participation, or you have some value. Or I like that word agency a lot.
Right.
And so that.
So you started that.
Mm-hmm.
Did you start it with somebody else? I've heard of that.
No,
it was just you. Okay.
It was just me.
Yeah, I ran across it. Huh.
And there was a time where a colleague from school, we were going to partner up and stuff, but it actually worked out better just to live together instead of get married. It really worked out. So Jim and I worked for a long time. We met at school, but
it's hard to find that perfect partnership.
Yeah, and I thought, I know you've been through it some, and nothing wrong with that really. And I think for me, and I also thought, no harm in that metaphor of just living together instead of getting married. It's sharing. We ended up buying an office building together, which was great to, as an architect, to own your own building.
Right.
Then you have
that's kind of unheard of.
That's the thing to fall back on. Instead of engineering, fall back on.
Is that the building you're in now, or is it? It was a different one?
It's right next door, and then I moved.
On Santa Fe.
Mm-hmm.
So how were you, to me now, like, as a young architect, that seems unfathomable, especially in Denver, of being able to buy a building or, have an office. Was that just, I guess you were already more advanced in school and working during school and just able to save up enough, and then with the agency, did you have projects right away? Or just kind of a continuation of the pop tops and those kind of things?
Yeah, again, it just kept evolving. I was doing that, and then my sister-in-law worked for Westward, and Regus Christou has a bunch of nightclubs, and the Vinyl and Serengeti and the church. There was all these. Well, she sold advertising for Westward, and knew him really well and knew he was looking for an architect, like a new architect. And so introduced me, and he owned it was called the Funky Buddha at 9th and Lincoln, 8th and Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
And he wanted to put a roof deck on. There was one other roof deck in Denver. I think it was down in Lodo. But roof decks were this brand new thing.
Really?
And what do I know about roof decks? But he was cycling through architects and wanted to get a new one, and he hired me to do this roof deck. Again, I have no idea how to do a roof deck. When I got all those houses in St. Croix, I didn't know how to do. I've had to teach. I've had to teach myself over and over again how to do stuff. But you can.
Yeah.
So
what was it? What was there? I want to dwell on that for a second. Like, was there fear there in St. Croix of like, I don't know how to do this, I can't do this by myself, and then you like somehow got pushed through it? Or do you have more of that personality where you're like, I might not know how to do this, but I'll figure it out, and then each time it gets easier and easier?
Yeah, I think I just, I was working with that firm, and as I transitioned, we had houses, I just studied the plans.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so I just told myself, this is not that, here's the structural engineering, here's all this stuff. And so I just said, I'll just figure it out. And surround people with people that know how to do stuff.
Right.
But and one of the nice things too at doing that roof deck was we had to work really closely with the fire department. And at that time, Chief Joe Gonzalez, he was such a magnificent, he was the chief of fire prevention. And I just remember really collaborating with it was just so much more accessible. You could go down and work with all the architects and the reviewers at the building department.
Really?
It was fantastic.
Wow. Huh.
And so really worked out with the fire chief how this is going to happen. And so again, I didn't have to know a ton of stuff. He said, I think we can do this, and he would talk about all the code sections, and a lot of it's pretty basic. You just got to figure out how to get a stair there. You put a bar up there. How to get the roof on. And then, like for instance, we put a whole new structure above the roof and left the roof so the water would just rain through.
Right.
And well, this roof deck thing. Now everybody wants a roof deck because it's this new hot thing.
And you're the roof deck guy.
I'm the roof deck guy. Isn't that bizarre? So, suddenly I'm the roof deck guy, which while I'm doing the roof deck, we need to expand our restaurant. And I became the restaurant guy. So that's how I got, Wind Coop Brewing Company. I had all these people contact me. And then once I'm working for Wind Coop and we're expanding the Cricket, we're doing, I'm getting to do all this really fun stuff. And, again, I didn't know how to do one thing about a restaurant, but all of a sudden they're like, we just need to add this, or we need to add a patio. So it's funny. I feel like my career has constantly just happened to me, but people say, very lucky, but I do agree with this premise that you make your own luck.
Right.
And again, I made it by just showing up in St. Croix.
Right.
I could have just been a bartender, or I just made it up by being on that roof, and I made it up by,
But each time
I just
you're
think
saying yes, right? That's the kind of difference.
Yeah,
right?
so I think I've been really lucky.
Yeah.
But I think, you somehow, because that question comes up all the time, Adam, about how do you get work?
Right.
And I've got a lot of young guys in the office that ask that all the time. And I
move to an island.
I think,
what you gotta do?
I think just be present, be out there, be rubbing shoulders with, there's this phrase from a podcast I listen to. It's the definition of culture is people like us do things like this. So it's really fascinating. Like that's what culture is. If you think of any culture, people like this group do things like this. So if you're out and about in, you can think about just restaurants here or these apartments or, there's a certain way we do things in Denver. And so if you're just in a, get on the board of a nonprofit or just be out there, just be mixing, people will find out you're an architect and you're naturally doing things that everybody else is doing, and they're going to go, well, you help me. I just think the key is to be out where you're doing things like everybody's doing, and then naturally they're gonna, like I was at barbecues and people needed something.
Right. But it's also interesting. Like I struggle with this a lot. Of okay, I only have a certain amount of hours in the day, right? And so much effort that I can put into things, and projects take so long.
Yeah.
And I would get into a thing of if someone offered me a roof deck, even if I need a project, I'd be like, I don't know, do I want to spend the next 3 months doing a roof deck?
Yeah.
And I almost talk myself out of most projects before I even see if there's a cool spark or something to them. But like so for you, getting out of grad school with all these ideas and the Stations of the Cross and like thinking big like that, and then going to pop tops and roof decks, and like that wasn't an issue for you. You're able to really find sort of, it seems like you're able to find like the joy in these different tasks easily. But
yeah, I think the problem solving is really interesting, and I think that, and I just really like people. So if they're thinking, oh, I have this dream, even if it's, I want to create this auto body shop, but then we try to really make it an environment where they're going to thrive.
Right.
But but a lot of times there's quite a bit of opportunity in there. It's not, occasionally it is just getting somebody through a permit.
Right.
But it's incredible how often there are these ways you can craft it and try. I always think of having $1 do 6 things because it's so expensive. So I tell them, well, it's got to do this, 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 and this. And so really invite the outside in and have this happen. And we did was very lucky and got to do a sculpture garden for Foothills Art Center, a museum out in Golden. And again, they wanted a sculpture garden, but the entry was really confusing, and there was no place for a fundraiser outside, and we just made sure all of these things happened within the exact same footprint, and now they use it for parties. Now it's very clear how to get in the building and how to. So I think you can, since it's so expensive, there's all kinds of opportunity in that about how do you answer a ton of different. If you're only answering one thing with $1, it's not worth it.
Yeah, except for those people who have way too many dollars.
Yeah.
But so you talked about, so then you became the restaurant guy, right? And take us through. I mean, some of the work that I know you best for is around the Highlands and Root Down and Little Man, and so how did those projects come about? And I mean, and they're both of those are very distinctive.
So there's fantastic clients that have these ideas. If you're used to trying to just really give everything you get all you can out of a project, get really excited about that. But this network that just keeps building, contractors would, a lot of times people come to a contractor first. And that's how really I got involved up in the Highlands, was contractor doing work up there, introducing me around. And we did Olinger up there. And then in 2003, there was just nothing going on up there, nothing. I mean, and so Paul Tamburello bought Olinger, and I had met him through this contractor, and he was really looking for somebody. Again, sometimes just looking for somebody that's going to embrace what he's talking about, and he and Stephanie Garcia bought that, and they, we did the plans to corn shell, and no restaurants were biting, nobody was coming up. I mean, we had that thing
so
done
that whole
and
area
ready.
was just really, really down and out.
Yeah, nobody saw the vision. Yeah, and then it was.
And he was just buying up kind of land around there, or like.
Yeah, well.
I'm in his generator office building right now, and so I see him, and
I saw that you're in the generator. So believing in I think at that time, it's always a stretch. A lot of people think developers just have but they're always walking this tightrope trying to make it all happen, because you really, you invest in that. You have the mortgage.
And he had already had Little Man ice cream going.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. So that whole Olinger mortuary complex, that giant piece.
Right.
He had the vision like, wow, this could be incredible. And again, nothing was happening around there yet. I mean, it was just, in fact, that they had all these programs trying to get the neighborhood to revitalize and have something happen. And it was, where just junk cars are being stored. And it took about 16 months to get the first tenant, if I recall. But then just Katie barred the door after that. So they got their tenants, and when tenants would come in, then we would do the restaurant. A lot of times.
Was that Linger? Like, did the restaurant come in right away?
So Linger was phase 2.
No, okay.
So the first part of the Olinger was the chapel and the florist shop, and that Linger was where the hearses were parked, the big huge garage and all that. So and I did not do Linger, but I did a few of the tenants in the first stage, and Paul had a little piece of triangular land left over, and he showed me this image of an ice cream can. And the story is Paul, he was a youth minister with the Catholic Church.
Oh, interesting.
And he really wanted to have a business where the offshoot would be rice and beans to poor people who are hungry around the world. He thought, how can I get a scoop of rice into somebody's hands? He's like, well, I'll sell a scoop of ice cream. That's how he decided to sell ice cream. It was about giving rice and beans away. And then he thought it'd be fun to do it and so we figured out how to build that can and, landscape around it. But, it's turned into this, we thought, what's the city going to think? Oh my God. But everyone's loved it. I always thought we'd get a little pushback. But I'm really into this idea of space and time being two sides of the same coin. I love thinking about this as an architect, in the last couple of years. And but that space and time, because we create space all the time. But we've all had this experience how time can be warped depending on the space. And it's interesting how people will just stand in line forever for that.
Yeah.
We are not, in our culture, we're not people who want to stand in line at all. I mean, at the grocery store, we're just fit to be tied. So there's something about the landscape and, of the ice cream, but it's just such a delight to relax and meet the person next to you. And I think I'm really intrigued about how we can help encourage that. I really think that, it comes from Stephen Hawking's reading his stuff. He talks about how space and time are really the same thing. We could really go down the rabbit hole with this. But to me, there's something really valuable there that we can, and I try to think about it a lot, that if we can pull off a building or a space or that it happened at Route down at the airport.
Oh yeah.
That we worked really hard on that, and the airport was so into it. They really helped us. We were the first project ever they had a group out of Chicago that reviews every tenant finish. It was the first one where they flew in to review it with us. It didn't just get sent to them. We said, no, we have to sit at the table. We have to meet the people reviewing. And because it was the first time San Francisco was doing this, where they were inviting local restaurants to create San Francisco flavor at SFO.
When was this? When did that get put in?
That was, the Day, what's her name? I was trying to think of that. Kim Day. She wanted to emulate that and bring in, time, how long ago was that? It was probably, is it 10? I don't know. But she wanted to bring in local flavor, so it wasn't just Panda Express or whatever. And so when it was all done, about a year later, I was out there and I talked to one of the servers, and I said, well, maybe a few months later, it's like, how are people reacting? And I love what she said. She said, it's a problem because people forget themselves in here. They're having such a good time that they miss their flights. She says it's happening all the time. And so, I don't want them to miss their flights. But again, that whole idea of the goal was to make the airport part of your travel experience, not just this inconvenience, this horrible and now my vacation starts once I get somewhere. And so it actually, but it makes me think about this whole part of space and time. It can really, I think it's a really great thing we can play with.
Right. I mean, and I love your website of just this simple partie sketch for each project, and then how you're just showing so much process sketches and things. And I was just looking at that Route Down DIA sketches today. And so take me through the sort of how you went about the design process to help stretch that time, right? And create that environment. What was it about that?
Well, it's really engaging with the client. Justin Cucci's this brilliant mind.
Right.
And he's another, again, just incredible listener, loves to collaborate. But I'll have to say, absolutely a huge part of generating the ideas there. So I think it really involves this empathy, this understanding, or this real engagement of what the client. I love what K&A guys said. That we are a service industry. Structural engineering, and the service is to really help your client speak with their own voice is how I take it, or just really help them achieve that big thing. The first day I met Justin on the first route down, we were in the parking lot of that gas station talking about the project, and here's what he said. He said, Ted, I want a restaurant that people think about in the shower. And I just thought, what a great way to think. 2 days later, you're just in the shower, how people zone out.
Yeah.
And he said, I want them to go, you know what, that was really great. That was great food.
Yeah.
So that's his. So
that's funny. I've had that moment with Root Down. Yeah. I was like, oh, remember that meal? Oh, yeah.
Well, see.
There it goes. Yeah.
And so that was the goal. So however we shape that, but that we, and then, you know, heavily borrowed from Saarinen, from the JFK, you know, like respecting but utilizing, you know, the round spaces and trying to, the golden age of air travel in the 60s with the, so there were things that we looked at and borrowed from that golden age. And then, you know, he loves to reuse stuff, and there was the airplane junkyard out here that's no longer there, and we bought all those flaps, and you know, they're rusted and jagged, and the airport let us put them in. So there was just a huge amount of ideas and collaboration, and you know, tons of work, tons of iterations, and then that flow. So the last thing we wanted was, you've just been through security. We didn't want linear, and you know, a lot of the restaurants don't. The kitchens are against the glass. You know, we wanted to make sure we're up at the glass and the light, and then we insisted on what they call the patio in the concourse, and they didn't want patios at DIA. You know, now they have it. Like, wait a minute, no. The idea is you sit there and you see people traveling, and you engage, and you know. So it was just. And he always talks about just make things a little small, so you have to rub shoulders with, you know, don't just make it a little tight. And then I designed those booth for one, and actually Justin hates those things, but people love these. You know, the typical airline traveler is 1.5 person per table is the number if you have a restaurant. So it's so I just thought, how fun would it be to have a booth, because people love booths, but a booth for one. And I've talked to so many people that love that idea. So it was just just trying to picture how you might be with a group or with this, or you're a single, or how you might meet people, and then infuse all of that history, that culture with new, and a lot of playful stuff.
And
yeah. So and then Justin had that brilliant idea. You know, or he loves to order stuff off eBay, the globes. And
all those globes, yeah.
And the electrician was fantastic. He was so into making that work. And then again, DIA usually so strict about UL this, that, the other thing, and you know, they're UL rated, but just those lamps are the globes. And so you get, I think same thing with like the fire chief, or you get people on board and excited about this huge goal, and then all of a sudden things start to, you know, like it goes back to my dad saying, why can't I just write a grant? You know, I love that idea of why not. And so I've realized it seems like every project I get involved with anymore it's improbable is the word I use. Like, they're all improbable. But maybe that's what attracts me. And then I just say, why not? And then go ahead and we're doing a project on Colfax right now where I was delighted to get a call from the city. She said, could we set up a time to talk with you? I've got about 4 or 5 people. We just don't know how to classify your project. We don't know if it's sculpture. We don't know if it's art. We don't know if it's a building. We don't know if it's landscape. We don't know if it's a sign. We don't know. I was thrilled to get this. Because I'm not trying to confuse people, but actually we're trying to blur things, you know, like make things interesting.
8 ways.
8 ways, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we want people, like the ice cream can, like, what the heck is that thing?
Right.
And so it's another ice cream idea. But I love it when we're able to blur these lines, and that's what we tried. I think it's what we try now to do in every project. It seems like that leads to this idea of a generous project, or one that blurs time.
Right. And it seems like I'm guessing in the same sort of way as your dad. Like, you have this sort of infectious magnetism of where you have this ability to kind of calmly, I guess, listen, empathize, and then generate ideas, and I want to get us to the collaborative that you have, and so I can see how that how that could draw people to you, and just where, again, I think sort of in the same way of like, I like to be by myself with my architecture firm, but I like to be surrounded by a lot of architects, you know.
Yeah.
And so was that the sort of like beginning? You know, you talked about it kind of happened again. This it's called Pendula, right?
Yeah,
right.
Pendula.
So how did that come about, and what is it now?
Well, there was with agency, again, things just happened to me. I had a large corporation out of Montana buy my firm.
Really?
Yeah, I became the regional office manager for a while. So it's just, we don't have to go down that route. But, just got a call, hey, we're trying to expand. It was CTA Architects out of Montana.
Okay.
Montana, great firm. And they wanted to go from 500 to 1,000 employees. They wanted to go from 11 offices to 19.
How many did you have employees?
I had 14.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, so I had that, I had grown to that.
Wow.
Very just traditional practice, right?
Right.
And this is, people like us do things like this. This is what you get employees. This is, you have an office manager, I was just emulating what I thought you should do. And then I get this call, and we worked together for a couple of years, but it made sense. I sold that firm. And so I don't have agency anymore. They bought it.
They took away your agency?
They took away my agency. Yeah. And worked with CTA for a couple of years, and the recession came. And they decided they wanted to shrink back down. CTA still exists here, but laying off people globally, it caused us to just wish each other well, which is great. And I got my own firm back, but I rented my space to the corporation. And so I had this big office. And at that time, a couple colleagues were with, they had office at Union Station, that got turned into the hotel. And so then with the recession, I think it just made sense to work out of their houses for a while.
Was this 2009 or what recession?
Yeah, right in there. Yeah, exactly. And so Ron Felighty, architect in town, he said, Ted, I should just rent one of your desks. So it was completely unplanned. But Ron said, I need space. I'll just join you. You have that huge space.
Right.
And then Steve Lewicki and so we just started, had this collaborative space. Again, I didn't plan it, but I love it as this laboratory, this experiment about how to practice, Adam.
Yeah.
And then it was intriguing. I was doing a jury, and one of the students said, well, how do I intern at your firm? I'm like, well, I don't know. How would that work?
You just rent a desk and you hang out. Yeah.
I just thought, well, and it's turned out, I think it's not for everybody, but I think it's a fabulous intern experience. And I don't even like using that word, because I really, who was it? Katie Barnes talked about horizontality, and I think Scott Lindenau talked about that a lot too. And I love this idea of working with people, and that really even someone that's just out of school has so many thoughts and ideas. I think we're all really equal in there. So I even hate using the word intern, but let's say you're even still in school, and we have people, part of the collaborative, that are still in school, and they have the opportunity to start their own business, and no one ever teaches us how to run a business. So it's pretty simple, and then you're able to work with all the architects in the office, get that experience, and then as a collaborator, you just jump right in. You're immersed in, and then you're participating in the project, and so I do think it's extremely good for someone who's just learning about the profession, and then they contribute everything they can and the ideas, and I've found it's like having a firm of 19 people without having the firm. It's quite, we all get to do, we all are, we all have contracts with each other and do it's all very above board.
Right.
But there's that, I just don't have to, payroll and oh my God, all that I had. And again, I think working with people instead of for people is a very profound change towards creating better architecture.
Right. And you each have your own agency and are able to determine what you want to work on or not, and No, I liked it a lot, and I just visited a few weeks ago, and you weren't in, but
oh, you were?
Yeah,
oh, nice.
it does feel great. Like and you know, each sort of row of desks, and it's all just totally open, and you can kind of shout over each other, and the light's great, and the big chalkboard with like party sketches, and I feel like I'm like constantly trying to get back to that studio experience, you know, of where you're just at your desks and you might be a little bit competitive, but you're all working together and you're just trying to make good stuff, and it's kind of all inclusive, right? And it's so easy to get into architecture, into a firm, and it's like, all right, I'm just doing life safety plans for 3 months or something, you know, and it's easy to lose that. But I find with those, it might have to do with some of like the scale of projects that you can take on if you're a sole practitioner, you know, but where you're able to kind of keep closer tethered to that school studio experience. And it's
remarkable how willing everyone is to just share everything they know. You know, like how do you solve this problem or that. I thought there might be a little proprietary, but no, it's remarkable. So it's you know, we can share work if someone's light or if someone has too much or someone's never done this type of project, or it's a good clubhouse. It's an experiment where you know, we bring in lunch and learns like other people. We have, you know, we get together trying to instill you know, conversations in the morning and trying to steer the conversation away from frustrations with permitting, which can devour the day.
Easily get,
Derailed.
Well, and it's like there's another group coming in at 4:30, so we have to sort of wrap it up here. But
okay.
I mean, I'm really interested in sort of, you know, you've had this firm, you've had sort of multiple iterations of this firm. You had a bigger firm. You have your own thing with this collaborative. Like, what's next? Like, what's the thing that's getting you excited moving forward? And what's next for the firm, for the collaborative?
Well, I think for my practice, what's nice right now is these improbable projects keep coming in. And you know, I look at it, but a lot of them they're really trying to do something different. There's a lot of potential. So I feel after building this all these years, I'm in a good spot where I think people are seeking out someone that's gonna, I just continue to get these projects that they're just impossible to say no because they're just so captivating. Right. Like you can't make these things up. Yeah. And so so I think at least right now continue to do, because it's a nice opportunity. It'd be wonderful to try to give some really valuable, generous, inspiring projects to the city if we can pull it off. And then I think for the collaborative, the energy just keeps turning up and up. I like it a lot, and that I think the questions around practice are even getting more intense. You know, the difficulty of just getting a project done, and then you know the whole AI thing on the horizon, and you know school's really expensive. Should I go to school? It feels like there's a lot, Adam, that we've always dealt with, but it feels like the volume's being turned up on quite a bit of, and then also with all those challenges, that's what architects deal with. You know, the opportunities I think are getting even more, and Denver is in such a perfect spot of, you know, a bit of a flyover, but this great, you know, I think it's a perfect laboratory for things to happen in terms of architecture. This, you know, with all the pressures of growth and whatever, you know, and all these infusion of ideas. Right. So I'm really excited and I'm really happy that the collaborative is in place to help foster. I think it's going to be it's a really good way, I think, of practicing to help foster these goals I've been talking about.
Right.
So,
And no, it's exciting. And, again, this is just like the second time we've ever met. And but I really do, I feel this magnetism from you. And I've enjoyed this conversation and like look forward to continuing these with you. And thanks for what you're doing, especially in my neighborhood around the Highlands and the city. So.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thanks for just generating conversation is really, really vital and important, and feeling connected. And just so excited about High-Low Buffalo and, your idea of consulting and collaborating more with people and the way you think. And, what a gift to be able to sit down and I'm eager to learn more about you or support, the school, what you've got going, just all of the, all these things we talk about. So so thank you. It's a treat to spend this time with you as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
You can visit architecting.com, that's architect-ing.com, to see images from this week's guest.
And please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have a great week and keep connecting.
This podcast is powered by The Plug.